Okay, in this video I want to talk a little bit about the satin stitches because there are so many people and they have a hard time understanding the satin and how can we create satin. There are many possibilities in a way on how you can work with a satin. I am not gonna say that my process is the right process. Everybody works and learns its own way. So there are many different ways that you can create, but I will show you with some of the uh, Inkscape text on how I go about creating satin stitching out of text, and I find that works really well for me. I want to make you aware also, I am working with a development version. There are a few aspects in the development version what works way nicer and better than in the version what you most likely are running, but hopefully it won't be long and the new aspect will be out. But I will try to keep it in mind and that I'm making certain adjustments according to the version that you have. So uh, I'm gonna scroll up here first. I will come back to this text here in a moment and we'll get started here. And in order to create a satin, all we need is the line, and we need, let me see here, maybe I'll go a darker color for visibility. For a satin, the main aspect where we have to be aware of, we want a satin to be a minimum of 1 millimeter. That is the minimum that you want to use. It is better to go the 1.2 because otherwise what you can get is the needle penetrations. They're getting really close to each other, and that can create issues like thread breaks, bird nests, all kinds of issues what you can create that way. So now that we know that a satin stitch, what it needs to have two rails, and it can have rungs, but it does not have to. And I will try to make you aware of a few things in that aspect too. So what we can start with, draw with the Bezier tool. It doesn't matter if the line is a straight line or with a lot of curves. We can go and convert one straight line with ink stitch, tool satin, and stroke to satin. So now we have this is a satin column, and a satin, it will stitch from where you start drawing your line, and it will end to where you stop the line. There are possibilities of adding commands, but then most of the time what will happen is ink stitch will split up the satin, and you can end up with two pieces of satin, but they will be, and they can connect wherever you set in your start and stop points. So now to analyze this a little further, what we can do here is if we go to the node select tool, and I'm gonna go and turn the color to yellow for a moment, and this rung, because it is just a straight section, we only get one rung in there. Once we start curving the line and have a different type of contour, then we will be getting more rungs, because the rungs, they will control the stitch angle. So now I can go and drag this one over for a moment, and I want to make sure that it's covering both of the rails, so I'm just widening it a little that I can keep it in the proper place. So then where we want to have a look at is, as you can see here, a satin, and if you watch here in the magnifier, then you can see it a little better. And you see these little red lines in there, and that's got an arrow on there, and that is the direction of the line. And you will see here on the bottom one and the top one are going in the same direction. But we can also create these satin columns differently. So as we know, each satin has to have 2 rails at least. That is the least it needs. So what we can also do is we can draw here one line, and I'll change here the width for a moment, and I'll change the color again. And now I'm drawing my second line, and so now what I did is I drew my first line going from the left to the right, and my second one from the right to the left. Now I have to go and select both of those lines. So we holding down the shift key when we are in the main screen to select both of them, and then we go to Path, Combine. And as you can see, I did not create a rung, and that is not needed because both of the rails have equal amount of nodes. As you can see, this line segment, that's got only 2 nodes. This one has got only 2 nodes. So there is no need for having a rung. And I have seen somebody making some videos on creating satin stitches, and he does everything without the rungs, and he says he doesn't like the rungs. Well, it is so much easier to work with the rungs, because when you're working with the nodes, it can be really time consuming to clean up some of your jobs because of the amount of nodes what are there, and to line up the nodes properly can be a pain, and adjusting stitch directions can be really time consuming. So now what do we see? As you can see, this arrow is pointing toward the left, and this arrow is pointing toward the right. That can work in some instances, but I advise that you make sure that before you're setting the params, that you're making the adjustment that both rails are going the same direction. Because especially if you have more connecting satins on it, then ink stitch can become confusing on which direction it needs to create the satin. There are adjustments available in the params, and I will show you that in a second. So what you then do is, depending which way we want to stitch it, so let's say this one we want to stitch from the right to the left, then I'm checking if the arrows are going pointing that direction, and we see that the top one is going the opposite. So we put a mouse pointer right on the line segment, and we selecting that line segment by giving it a single click, and we will see that a node on each side is being selected, and then we can go path and we can go reverse. And as we can see now, this arrow is pointing to the left and that arrow is pointing to the left. So now we can go and to the extension, ink stitch params. I could have gone, so I'll take this one out of the way for a moment. So, and what we will see then is, because we did not apply params to it yet, while, or I can close, no, I should just close out of here for a second yet, because I should show you something else yet. Here with the yellow one, and I'll turn that one dark green for a moment. What we did here is we changed a line through the ink stitch menu into a satin. So the satin command has been applied to this object already, while here with the blue one, because this one was created as two separate lines and we used the path combine, then ink stitch will read it as a running stitch. So we cannot go and load both types into the params, because they are two separate stitch types. And we can go for a moment and do it. So I'll select both of them and I go to extension, ink stitch params, and there you can see it shows for both the satin column. That is a possibility that because of that I'm running with a newer version, that some of these things have changed, but we'll see. I'm just gonna go hit apply and quit, or what I will show you here is reverse rails. That is where you can change the stitch direction. So we can see that on this satin column, because sometimes we want that the stitching ends up on a specific side in order to make the proper connections onto the next object. So sometimes we want to reverse the rails. And so let's see. Okay, there is here the reverse the rails and swap the rails. So swap the rails, that will change the stitching endpoint onto the other rail. So if I go swap rails, and there you will see now the marker is over here. It is hard to see, but the crosshair is on this side now. And since I'm with a development version, I do have here the start at nearest point and end at nearest point. And that is a great new feature what is in the new version. That way we don't have to make near as many connections anymore, way less organizing going on, because there are a lot of automated features only because of these two settings. There are instances that we do not want these applied, so we have to be cautious and always check in your simulator on what is happening and where are there any mistakes. So I'm gonna go here, apply and quit, and now I'll go to the simulator for a moment. And there we can see the one satin. And so like now you can see in the params it was showing up okay as a satin, the blue one. But now here in the simulator you can see that this one, the blue one, did not convert into a satin. And that is because the satin, the green one, was a converted line through the ink stitch menu, convert line to satin, and this was a manual created. So in the end, always make sure you run your project into the simulator just in case if there are certain issues. So this to a certain point, this shouldn't happen, that in the simulator it was showing a proper satin and here in the simulator not, but that is something for the developers to work out, but I might go and pass on that info to them. So now what needs to happen, we have to go back to the blue one and we have to change the settings for a moment. So now we go selected, extension, ink stitch, params, and there you can see there is the running stitch along the path. All we need to do here is go to the satin column and we go custom satin column. And once that has been applied, then I always apply my undersewing according to my need or according to the width of the satin column. This one is only 1.2 millimeters wide. Then for that reason I always just use the center walk underlay. Here you will see there is a repeat of 2. So what it will do is it will go down the center and come back down the center and then start doing the satin. But if you change this to a 1, then what it will do is it will make one line undersewing and it will start stitching the satin in the opposite direction. So I'll replay this one and you can see the satin is going here from the right to the left. Now I will change my repeat, give it a 1, and there you can see it is sewing now from the left to the right. So now that I have made my changes, I also use my preferred settings are a little different than what are here, but I'm not going to go into that. This is about the creation of some of the satins. Also, for specific satin stitching, we only want to go, we don't want to go any wider Most softwares, they will recommend not to go wider than 8 millimeters. If you're going over the 8 mil, then we have options within Inkstitch that we can change all kinds of settings. We can go to the S stitch, we can go to the E stitch, or oh no, the E stitch is totally different. That is mainly being used for tag down, for applique. So if I change it here to the E stitch, then also you want to change your spacing. So let's say I'm entering a 2 mil spacing, there you can see, and I would not want my underlay. So there you can see I have my E stitch. Then now I want to have that the other direction. So then we have to go and swap the rails, and now we can see we have the E stitch going in the opposite direction. So that is a part of the satin stitch also. So the E stitch, and then we have an S stitch. So that is back and forth, and so that depends on your zigzag spacing again. Let me go there to 1, and there you can see it just depends on what do you want, what do you need. So do research with these numbers. Also, when we're going wider than the 8 millimeters, then we start working here with the random face split stitches, the minimum length for the face. We can use the random seed, we can use then, that will give a different stitch pattern. We can use minimum stitch length. Also, we can make it a split satin. So if your satin is wider than the, say, the 8 millimeters, then you can make it a split satin. Then you can start setting a maximum stitch length. Since I'm really narrow here already, I will only go and enter a maximum stitch length of 1 for a moment, just to show you on what is gonna happen then. And here you can see we getting the stitch points, and there we got a line of stitch points. So probably if I go here around the 2, I didn't check how wide my starting line was, but as you can see now with a maximum stitch length, I'm getting a row of stitches going down the center. So that way we can make a split satin. And if you have a satin what in certain areas is curved and is way wider, you may end up that you get 2 sections in one part and 3 sections in another part. So this setting will control that your stitches are not gonna be too wide. But when it comes to that, then I prefer the look of the let me see here, the random face split stitches. I like that better, but that is also personal preferences. But play with these settings, look at these sew outs here in the param screen and see what happens with your stitch points. Make sure that you have your trims and jumps and the needle penetrations turned on. Also, if you find that your needle points are too small or your lines are too narrow, They can be set up here in the simulator preferences. You can set your line width, and you can set your point size for the needle penetrations. So play with these settings, familiarize yourself with the software. Okay, so now that this has been applied as a satin, now when we go to the ink stitch and we go to the simulator, oh, I did not apply, as you can see. So it is so easy to make a mistake, since a person is talking and not focusing perfectly on what you're doing. And we go here, the satin column, custom satin column, apply and quit. And now we can grab them again, extension, ink stitch, visualize simulator. And now we should be fine. As you can see, now we have both of these lines are proper converted into a satin. So be aware of that. The params and the simulator are two different things, and it is always important to run your final project, run it through the simulator, because that is where you will find most of the time the best way the mistakes. And also take the scroller and scroll through your design fairly easily, especially if you see somewhere in between and there is a frog where they need to be cleaned up, that you can scroll down there and then check out what is going on, what needs to be changed, what needs to be fixed. Okay, so that is the basics of a satin. Now what we'll do is I will show you. Here we go to the node select, and now I'm gonna go and put this one in an angle like that, and this one, because I'm working here without the rung, and I'm gonna put there a node, as you can see. And well, I'll talk to you in that in a moment yet. So now we will go and run both of them back in the simulator. Ink stitch, visualize simulator, and there you can see the stitch directions. They start going here in an angle, but you can see it has straightened out over here, and that is because of from the point where the rung is intersecting toward the end point, there are no other rungs, so it will slowly start straightening out toward the end. And you can see the same thing here. It appears a little different stitch angle here, but that is also because of the width of the satin, and it appears different. And here we also see a few of the short stitch insets. That's not a big problem either. That is for most things that will be advantageous, so you don't get too many needle penetrations in a small spot. So that is something to be aware of. So now I'm going to close out of here. So now I'm going to go back to my node selection for a moment, because now we want to change the stitch angle. And like I said, there are some videos out there, and they will say don't use the rungs and only the nodes, but the nodes only, it can be really annoying, because to make an adjustment in a situation like this, it's not that hard. All you need to do is click here the node, and then the other one you can hit the delete button and delete the node, and now I have changed the stitch angle. But if you start dragging, as you can see, it is really hard to go and drag a node in a straight direction and keeping the line straight. So we do quite easy that we do deformations on the rails. Also, depending on what your node setting is. So if I'm double clicking on the node select there, we want to be also aware that if you are using the feature of using the nodes, then I would recommend that you're deleting the nodes, preserve the shape, that you have that check mark. I do not have that check marked because I like to work with it in a different way. So when I'm deleting a node, it will make a straight line segment. Okay, then so that is why with working with nodes. So if I want to have better control over my stitch direction, then what you want to do is with the nodes, then you want to have create extra nodes, and you want to have the nodes most of the time perpendicular to each other in comparison with the rails. If you're working with rungs and we want to add more rungs, and more rungs can be added to any satin column. So what you do is you select one satin column and then press down the shift key, and then you can either use the Bezier tool or the pencil tool. I love working with the pencil tool for that, and that is one single click here and one single click there, and continuously holding down the shift key, and I can create as many rungs as I want. So that is how you can control your stitch angles. If I want to have a certain area and I want to have more angle to it, and sometimes if we are going with a narrower satin, so if you're going 1 millimeter or less, then I really recommend to go and angle your rungs. Or that one is getting too much, so we'll delete them, and and we can delete them to get a little more room on the screen. So what I do, if I create really narrow satin, then what we will be doing is we will create the stitching more in an angle, because if I take now my tape measure and I'm going here from this spot to that spot, As you can see, I am 3.5 millimeter. And now I go straight across. I am at 1.5 millimeter. So there you can see, by angling the rungs, we can increase it a fair bit, and we get a proper stitch length. So especially for the narrow satins, that is really important that you're being aware of that. Okay, so to get out of the measure tool, all you need to do is click on the select tool again, and you will get out of it. Okay, so that is a few of the basics on a satin. Let me see here. Maybe I should go and stop this video on the basics of the satin, and then I will be making more videos, and then my next one I will go and start working on how can I convert any kind of text into a satin, and I will be showing you the process I'm using for that. Okay, so I hope you get a little better understanding on how and what with your satin, and we'll take it from there. Okay, thanks for watching.